Hello everyone. Today I want to share a fascinating story from the early days of the internet that still echoes in our world of computers and online security. It is about the Morris worm, a program that started as a simple experiment but ended up causing chaos across thousands of machines. To understand this tale, let us first step back to the late 1980s, when the internet was still very young and small compared to what we know today. Back then, the internet connected only about 60,000 computers worldwide, mostly at universities, government labs, and research centers. These machines ran on systems like Unix. People used them for sharing information, sending emails, and doing scientific work. Computer viruses were not common yet, but the idea of self-spreading programs had been around. For example, as far back as the 1970s, researchers like John Schock and John Hupp at Xerox had created simple worm-like programs to test networks. Even today, worms and viruses evolve, as we saw with things like the WannaCry attack in 2017, that locked up hospitals and businesses around the world. Now, let us meet the person behind this historic event, Robert Tappan Morris. He was a bright young man, just 23 years old in 1988. Robert grew up surrounded by computers because his father, Robert Morris Sr., was a pioneer in the field. His dad worked at Bell Labs, one of the top places for tech innovation. His father even helped write papers on Unix security, warning about password weaknesses years earlier. Young Robert attended Harvard University for his undergraduate studies. After graduating in June 1988, he started graduate school at Cornell University in New York. There, he became curious about the size and structure of the internet. He wanted to find out how many computers were really connected. To do this, Robert decided to create a special program that could travel from one machine to another, counting as it went. He called it a worm, and he designed it to spread quietly without causing harm. But as we will see, a small mistake turned this innocent idea into a massive problem. Robert built the worm using clever techniques. It exploited a flaw in a program called Fingered, which had a buffer overflow weakness that let the worm take control. Second, it took advantage of a bug in SendMail, an email program that allowed debug mode commands to run unauthorized scripts. Third, it tried remote shell access through RSH. And as a backup, the worm even guessed common passwords by checking a list of about 480 simple ones, like password or the user's name backward. However, he made the worm ignore that check 1 out of every 7 times. This turned out to be the big error. It caused the worm to reinfect machines over and over. In today's terms, this is similar to how modern worms like NotPetya spread by exploiting Windows vulnerabilities, causing billions in damage. On the evening of November 2nd, 1988, Robert launched the worm from a computer at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, or MIT, to hide his tracks from Cornell. Within hours, things started to go wrong. The reinfection bug kicked in, processes ate up memory and processing power, slowing systems to a crawl. By midnight, reports of strange behavior poured in from places like the University of California at Berkeley, where students noticed their computers lagging badly. At Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, a scientist named Russell Brand saw his VAX computer's load jump 1,000 times in seconds, forcing him to trace the attack. The worm hit about 6,000 machines, which was roughly 10% of the entire internet back then. Vital functions at universities, NASA, and military sites slowed down. This showed how interconnected the world was. Much like the SolarWinds hack in 2020, that snuck into networks through a trusted software update. As the night wore on, panic spread through the small community of internet users. Phone lines buzzed with calls between experts, and bulletin boards filled with urgent messages. One famous post from Berkeley warned, "We are under attack by an internet virus." Teams across the country worked feverishly to stop it. At Purdue University, Professor Eugene Spafford coordinated with others to analyze the worm's binary code, reverse engineering it to understand its tricks. They found the worm did not destroy files or steal data. It was not meant to be destructive, but its endless copying made machines unusable. To kill it, admins had to reboot systems, delete files, and patch the vulnerabilities. They added checks for buffer overflows and disabled the SendMail debug mode. Robert himself realized the mistake quickly. He tried to send an anonymous message with fixed instructions, but the cloaked network delayed it. By morning, the worm was contained. This response highlighted the power of community in cybersecurity, a tradition that continues today with bug bounty programs where companies pay hackers to find flaws. In the days that followed, the story exploded in the media. Newspapers like the New York Times ran headlines about the computer virus that paralyzed the nation. The FBI launched an investigation, tracing the worm back to MIT and then to Cornell. They interviewed Robert, who admitted his role but said it was an accident. In 1989, he became the first person convicted under the new Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, setting rules for what counts as unauthorized access. Robert got 3 years of probation, 400 hours of community service, and a fine of $10,050. He avoided jail, partly because the worm was not malicious. Afterward, Robert went on to a successful career, becoming a professor at MIT, ironically, the place he used to launch the worm. His story reminds us of the curious explorer. Today, with ransomware gangs like those behind the Colonial Pipeline attack in 2071, motives are often about money or disruption. The Morris worm left a lasting legacy. First, it led to the creation of the Computer Emergency Response Team, or CERT, at Carnegie Mellon University. CERT became a model for similar groups worldwide, helping during crises like the Code Red worm in 2001 that infected hundreds of thousands of servers. Second, it raised awareness about software vulnerabilities. Before the worm, security was an afterthought. After, it became a priority. Third, it sparked debates on ethics in computing, leading to better education on responsible hacking. Today, we see echoes in how worms have evolved. Today, we see sophisticated worms like Stuxnet in 2010, which targeted Iran's nuclear program by sabotaging centrifuges through USB drives. Or Conficker in 2008, which created a massive botnet of millions of computers, ready for commands but never fully activated, showing how worms can lurk silently. These modern threats use AI to mutate code and evade detection. Yet, basic lessons remain. Strong passwords, regular updates, and firewalls can prevent most attacks. The Morris worm was more than just a glitch. It was a wake-up call. Thank you for joining me on this journey through tech history. It shows how one small program can change everything. See you next time.